Welcome to the Inside Story. I'm Billy Hollowell, and today we are diving into a really interesting issue surrounding Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. We're going to get into what is happening there and why it matters. I'm joined by the Christian Post, Michael Gryboski. How you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Well, I want to get into this. You have covered, you've done a number of stories on this. And, on the show, we talk about all different issues in the news that are going on. This one is particularly interesting because it deals again with Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. And this is an institution that has a deep history. And whenever it comes to, a college, a university, a Christian organization that has had such an impact, it's important for us to break down the story and sort of talk about it. But before we get into the latest developments of what is happening, can you give us a little bit of the history of Trinity Evangelical?
Yeah, sure. Trinity Evangelical Divinity School was founded in 1897. It traces its roots back to efforts to train ministers for what was then called the Swedish Evangelical Free Church of America. That denomination would later become the Evangelical Free Church of America in 1950 when the Swedish church merged with the Evangelical Free Church Association. But throughout that time, the Divinity School was used to train a lot of their clergy, a lot of their pastors. In the 1960s, Trinity Evangelical moved to its current location in Bannockburn, Illinois, which is about 30 miles from Chicago. In the 1990s, it merged with a Trinity College to form a Trinity International University, which the Divinity School is a part of, at least for the present time, until it moves, basically. Trinity Evangelical is known for having trained a lot of clergy, a lot of scholars as well. Some of the notable alumni include prolific Christian apologist William Lane Craig, theologian and New Testament scholar Douglas Moo, the controversial late apologist Ravi Zacharias, and also the distinguished church historian Mark Knoll, and that's just a few.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of influence here, which is why this is
Mhm.
important, and that influence has had an impact on the church. Now, this big move to Canada, can you dive a little more into what drove that decision? It's a pretty, and I'm going to use the word radical, meaning major move to
Mhm.
say, hey, we're actually leaving the U.S. and going 2,000 miles away. Why are they doing that? Take us through more of that information.
Well, according to the Divinity School itself, which made the big announcement of the move back in April, they have been planning some sort of relationship or collaboration with Trinity Western University of British Columbia since the 1980s. There had been talk about creating a TEDS Canada, basically, since then. But these efforts had never really come to fruition. But the two had been in talks and had connections, in part because they have the same statement of faith and overall similar mission. But it wasn't until last month, like I said, that Trinity Evangelical officially announced that their plan to move from the campus of Trinity International University to Trinity Western University in order to become the Canadian institution's official seminary. Their official announcement didn't really state a specific reason for their decision to move, but reports show elsewhere that, like other seminaries and divinity schools, they've been experiencing a drop in both funding and student enrollment. In fact, just last year, Trinity International University, which is what Trinity Evangelical is currently part of, they had to close down their Florida campus, known as TIU Florida, due to what they described as, quote, enrollment challenges, rising competitive costs, and a small endowment.
Yeah, I mean, the assumption is that you don't make a move like this unless you need to. Now, we don't know
Mhm.
all the details, but that's an assumption people would make, right? That there's a reason to do it. And it's interesting because when you do this sort of thing, the biggest question is, well, how does it impact faculty and students? And let's talk about the students because when you are physically moving your location thousands of miles away to another country, in this particular case, what's the timeline? How will these moves impact the students?
Well, the official timeline states that Trinity Evangelical will remain at its current location in Illinois for the 2025 to 2026 academic school year. The move to Canada is scheduled to take place after that and is expected to be completed by fall 2026. So if you are a student who's currently at Trinity Evangelical and you're set to graduate in either the winter of 2025 or spring 2026, this move actually shouldn't impact you. As for the students who are still slated to be enrolled beyond next spring, Trinity Evangelical has said that it will give them the opportunity to complete their degrees online, or they can move to the Canadian campus. According to their frequently asked questions entry on their website, the Divinity School said that students who are U.S. citizens should still be eligible for certain programs, things like federal loans and the like. So theoretically, they do have ways to accommodate students, the current students and students who might still be there after spring 2026.
It's interesting because that obviously gives students who are currently there, I would imagine, some peace that they know sort of what to look forward to and how to handle it. I do want to address something. This is actually not a new discussion about this merger. I think some people hearing this, they might think, oh, this must have been drastic and it just came about. There's a history there. This conversation about these, institutions coming together started a while ago, did it not?
Yeah, at least, like I said, back to the 80s. Is as far back as they've been talking. But there's also been issues regarding declining enrollment, financial issues that have been going on for a while as well. One of the people I got to talk to for a story, an alumnus of Trinity Evangelical by the name of Ryan Mullins. He's now a professor and author. He graduated from the school in 2010 with a master's in philosophy of religion, and he had told me in an interview that he remembered back in the 2000s, the mid to late 2000s, people speculating that they were going to move out of that neighborhood just because it was a very expensive place for the school to be based. And Mullins himself actually did a podcast in 2022, about 3 years ago, in fact, titled "The Downfall of Trinity Evangelical Divinity School," in which he talked about how the school has been suffering poor financial health. They've reportedly had issues with their treatment of professors. There had been rumors for some time now that they were going to move or become something like a fully virtual school at some point. So there's been a lot of this. This has been kind of coming for years now, so to speak. These issues, and you can also see it with kind of the decline in enrollment, according to data compiled by the Association of Theological Schools. For the 2003-2004 academic year, Trinity Evangelical an overall full-time enrollment of 872 students. But by the time you get to the 2024-2025 academic year, the current academic year, basically, they'd gone from 872 full-time enrolled students to 402 full-time enrolled students. So these drops have definitely been over time have been starting to really impact the school.
Yeah, and that's important for people to understand in that history here. One of the things before we go that I do want to talk about, the community standards that students must sign. When it comes to this merger, there have been some issues, obviously, with TWU in Canada, some legal issues over the years with their essential community standards that their students needed to sign, them sort of pulling back from that with Trinity Evangelical Divinity School coming in with this merger. What do we know about these community standards? How will that be affected? Do we have any information on that?
Well, with regards to Trinity Western University, years ago they faced litigation and backlash over a policy they had for staff and students known as the Community Covenant, which, among other things, prohibited any sexual activity outside of marriage between a man and a woman. And critics of that covenant argued that it was discriminatory against the LGBT community. And when the university attempted to gain accreditation for a proposed law school, it was declined, which resulted in years of litigation. And in June 2018, the Supreme Court of Canada actually upheld the denial of accreditation for their law school. And basically, as a result, TWU was forced to drop the community covenant as a requirement for students, though faculty and staff still had to agree to it. And the big thing was, of course, because it's Canada and not the United States, you don't really have the strict religious liberty protections for people who are, religiously, morally opposed to homosexuality like you do in the United States. That's not really how their system is. That's not really how their laws have evolved over the last several years. And so, with regards to Trinity Evangelical, they're going to be going to a campus that just went through that. And with Trinity Evangelical, they have a community standards policy for their students right now, which prohibits, among other things, quote, dishonesty, theft, premarital sex, abortion, adultery, homosexual behavior, and use of pornography, profanity, gossip, racism, and infringement upon the rights of others, end quote. And there's some question as to whether or not they'll still be able to enforce that. And I myself, I contacted a spokesperson for this divinity school and asked them, are they going to keep enforcing their community standards policy once they move up to Canada? And they didn't comment. They didn't give me a comment on that one. They didn't say yes or no on it. So I guess it's more of a wait and see.
Yeah, and it may be that they haven't even figured it out yet. When you're making all these
Possibly. Yeah.
decisions, right? I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here, and so that's going to be very, very interesting. Just final question: what else do you want people to know about this story and why it matters?
I would say because it shows a broader trend among seminaries and divinity schools in the United States, many of which are dramatically reducing their class offerings, or they're closing down altogether, or they're losing their accreditation because of financial woes. It's not even so much a decline in religious affiliation among young Americans issue per se, especially because anymore we've been seeing actually the rise of the nuns start to taper off. It's more of just the simple fact that fewer and fewer people are pursuing a professional seminary education. And I think that a theological institution as prominent and as influential and as distinguished as Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, for them to have not be above these problems, for them to have these problems too, should sound the alarm bells for a lot of other Christian schools out there.
Absolutely. And there's a lot here to consider. And so I am looking forward to seeing where this story goes. You've done some great coverage on it, and I know more is to come. Michael, appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Everyone else, make sure you head on over to the Christian Post and tune in next week for another episode of The Inside Story. We'll see you then.